It's time for a BEMA FAQ video, frequently asked question, about Abraham, Sarah, and Iscah. We did that session 1 episode. Chances are good it's not very far in. It's like, 8 episodes into the podcast journey. We do an episode about Abram and Nahor choosing to marry their nieces, essentially. And part of the rabbinical teaching, part of the midrash, part of what Jewish tradition says, is that Iscah and Sarai is the same person. And that's what you see happening there. And you can listen to the podcast for that. That episode raised so many questions, and for a long time, I would get that email weekly at least every single week. It was the most frequently asked question that we dealt with, and it didn't feel like the thing I wanted to make a frequently asked video for, and so we just kind of we batted it around. We had an auto response, kind of like a macro that we would copy and paste for the Iscah thing. We had a template that we would use for that. And then we finally got to session 6 of the podcast, and we did a whole episode dedicated to just dealing with those questions and answering those questions. I missed one element of the discussion that always comes up, and it came back to, but we did a whole episode on it, and we put it in the show notes to the original episode, and it did help. It did help curb the weekly emails that came in about that episode, but they did not go away. We still get questions. We even get questions from people that have listened to the episode, listened to the follow-up episode, looked at the email explanations, and still are like, I still have all these questions. So here we are. We're going to keep making resources to address that episode and that conversation until it finally helps everyone enough. Okay? So the question, if you haven't listened to the episode, I'm not going to do a summary of it here. This video won't make any sense to you. So you'll need to make sure you've listened to that episode. I'll put the link to that episode in the description of this video. I'll put the link to the follow-up episode in the description of this video. If there's any other links that are helpful or necessary, I'll put those as well into the links of that episode. But a few things. Let me just walk through what the typical responses that people are usually wrestling with, okay? When we first did the episode, we kind of touched on just the rabbinic teaching, the midrash, the commentary, the Jewish tradition that says that what Abram does is that they have these two nieces, Iscah and Milcah, and they now are orphaned. Their father has died, his brother, Avram's brother. It's his kids, and they're going to be on their own, unprotected in this ancient patriarchal world as they're kind of moving, and as a family they've left Babylon, and God's invited them to, and so what they do is they end up saying, we need to take care of our nieces. And so they decide to marry their nieces, which sounds weird to us and probably should. I'm not saying it's not weird, but in their world would be less weird and is not prohibited by Torah later. Marrying the niece, I'm trying to remember exactly what's said. There is going to be some prohibitions for Torah, but any kind of cousin or more distant relation is technically permitted in the world of Torah. So you don't quite have that. It feels a little funny. So first of all, there's an initial wave of people just like, whoa, that feels just so weird to me. And granted, it does feel weird. Maybe it should feel weird. All those things. So if that's just keep wrestling. Then you have a group of people that pay attention and they do the math and they go, wait a minute, if that's true, if Avram's the firstborn and I do the math on Haran, Avram, Nahor, and Haran, and Avram's the firstborn, that means that Haran was 10 years old when he gave birth to Iscah. The math doesn't work because he didn't father Iscah when he was 10 years old. And so that's the first pushback. And in the original episode, I kind of do. I'm not really even thinking about that. And I kind of give the impression that I just kind of assume in my language that Avram's the firstborn. And so to speak to that, there are two different strings of Jewish tradition, two different strings of commentary, two different streams of thought. One stream of thought says and teaches in the tradition that yes, in fact, Avram is the firstborn, and Haran did miraculously father, it was a miracle, he miraculously fathered Iscah when he was 10 years old. That's not the popular midrash for probably obvious reasons, all right? The more popular midrash and the more popular stream of thought says that Avram is not the firstborn. And that makes a lot of sense in the text because Haran is married with kids. You wouldn't have bypassed two older brothers to marry a younger brother to marry him off. The older brother would always be married off first. So that kind of fits the details of the text. We do speak to this, by the way, if you want a deeper dive, we do speak to this in the follow-up episode. That's also linked there, okay? So we speak to that. So that's the thing. On one hand, in one Jewish tradition, yes, Haran is 10 years old when he fathers Iscah. It's a miracle. But in the more popular Jewish tradition, Avram's not the firstborn, and the math does work out, and that's why that discrepancy. Okay? The second pushback comes because people go to Genesis 20, where Avram is talking to Avimelech, and he says, she is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And so they come back and they're like, see, she's not the niece. It says it right there. She's actually a half-sister, which, by the way, if we were bothered by the niece thing earlier, we should be twice as bothered by the half-sister thing. Because that would just flat out be incestual. So I don't know why that argument doesn't come with a whole paragraph of explanation, but that's the other pushback. But what's not understood in that observation is how the Hebrew language works. Okay? In the Hebrew, references of kinship are vertical and horizontal. Okay? There's a word for vertical predecessors, ancestors. That word is fathers. A father of, in the Hebrew, of can be my dad, it can be my granddad, it can be my great-grandfather, it can be my great-great-grandfather, it could be my ancestor. All of those are avot, fathers. They're all fathers. A father isn't just my father. It could also be my grandfather or any vertical predecessor. That's a father. Okay? Buried with my fathers means buried with my ancestors. Right? Okay? Brother or sister is a Hebrew term that can refer to any horizontal relationship in the Beit Av. So that's a brother is a brother, a brother is a nephew, a brother is a cousin, a brother is right? Brother. So horizontal relationships, vertical relationships. Okay? Vertical relationships, horizontal relationships. You see this when Avram's talking about Lot, and he says, we're brothers. Lot's not his brother. Lot is his nephew. But in the Hebrew language, that term brothers is the term that he would use. So when Abraham tells Avimelech, the term mothers conceptually could function as a vertical, but never did. Practically, it was never, because you were not lineage wasn't traced maternally in the ancient. In Abraham's world, you didn't, because the woman went and joined the house of the patriarch. So it's the Beit Av, it's the house of my father. So a woman joins the father's line. So that you don't trace lineage through, you would never say mothers in the same way you would say fathers in the Hebrew. Conceptually it would work, But there's no case of it because you don't use language that way in that point in history in that part of the world. Okay? So what Abraham says is, she is the daughter of my father, but not of my mother. And in the English, that feels like he's saying she's my half-sister, which would either be or a lie, one of the two. But that's not what he's saying. He is actually explaining the exact technical truth to Avimelech in their world, in the Semitic language. He's telling him, she is the daughter of my lineage. She's a paternal ancestor. She's the daughter of my father, Terah, but not the daughter of my mother. So she's not my sister. She is actually a horizontal member of my Beit Av. She's my niece. So what he's literally saying in the Hebrew is not what it sounds like technically in the English. He's saying in the Hebrew exactly what the situation is. She is a part of my household, but she is not my the daughter of my father, patriarch, but not the daughter of my mother. She's not in my immediate family. She's in my patriarchal family. She's in the mishpacha. She's in the Beit Av, but she's not my direct immediate family member. So when I called her my sister, I was correct. That's Abraham's case that he's making to Avimelech. So that's that explanation. Okay. So now we've dealt with Haran was 10 years old. Now we've dealt with, but Abraham says in Genesis 20 that she's his half sister. Now here's the greater issue. All of that stuff doesn't even matter all that much. Like, we're getting hung up, and it's because this is a new journey for us, right? When you're in session 1, this is brand new. Like, I've never even interacted with the Midrash before. I don't even understand how Eastern thought works. Like, all these details are just kind of like swirling around and beginning to coalesce. And so we're taking things super literally, and we're getting hung up on mechanics, and we're like proof texting the scriptures in this weird Western way to deal with Eastern stories. And so everything's a little callywumpus, right? But here's the bigger deal. And we say this in the episode, the second episode. Here's the thing that matters the most. Not the details and the Hebrew language and the kin and Haran being 10 years old. Here's what we're trying to learn. Not the historical, literal truth of Iscah or Sarah being Abraham's niece. What we're trying to learn is how Jewish commentary, how Jewish wisdom functions. The question isn't what literally happened historically. That's what we do as Westerners. We have to train ourselves to quit doing that. That's not the thing that matters the most. The thing that matters the most is, what is the Bible trying to teach us? Not what happened. That's not what the Bible's trying to teach us. The Bible's not trying to teach us what happened. The Bible's trying to teach us something about wisdom that's going to change us, transform us, make us better people. So the Jewish Midrash is trying to teach us something. The lesson here is not the historical truth. The lesson here is what it looks like to see somebody in need and take care of them. And in the midst of all of this, like arguing about half-sisters and nieces, we miss the Jewish wisdom that lies in the Midrash, which is trying to tell us Abraham saw the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Abraham saw the people on the outside, the marginalized. Abraham saw those who were going to be endangered, and he reached out and took care of them. And he did it at his own expense. That is the point of the story. And don't let ourselves get pulled off into all these other... It's okay to ask those questions. Like, maybe you're like, okay, I got the story, I just had this question. That's totally fine. And then this video was hopefully helpful. But the greater, like what we're trying to do at the beginning of the podcast journey, is we're getting used to a whole new way of looking at the Bible and the scriptures. It's a whole new way of doing it. Because we've gone to the Bible to look for history. We've gone to the Bible to look for truth. We've gone to the Bible to look for data. We've gone to the Bible to look for proof texts for my theology. But we need to learn how to go to the Bible to find meaning, to find transformation, to find God. God's trying to meet us in the pages of Scripture. That's why we study the Scripture. And that probably shouldn't be like this revelation, and yet it is for many of us, isn't it? And it takes a while. It takes a while to learn that new language. So anyway, I hope that video is helpful. I hope it's an encouragement. I hope it's a challenge. All the above. And for all those questions that come in that want all those questions answered, hopefully we have another resource to add to the mix. All right, guys? Check the description of the video. There will be links in there. You can dive deeper in all this stuff. You can hear this said in different ways. And the more you hear it, the more you can wrestle with it. The more you wrestle with it, the more you end up being changed. So may God do that good work in you. We'll see you the next time.